The vote is precious. It is the most powerful non-violent tool we have in a democratic society. Democracy workers have the duty to protect the sanctity of the ballots. This module contains a discussion of the composition, constitution, and benefits of election workers in voting centers and polling places, as well as the qualifications, rights, and duties of watchers in connection with the May 9, 2022 national and local elections. The first discussant is Attorney Grace M. Faustino, the Election Officer 3 of La Trinidad, Benguet. And the second one is Attorney May Richelle B. Belmes, the Provincial Election Supervisor 2 of Abra. Both Attorney Faustino and Attorney Belmes took their master's degree in Japan under the Japanese Grant Aid for Human Resource Development Scholarship.
Hello, trainers, members of electoral boards, and everyone who is now watching this video. Attorney Grace and I are going to discuss Articles 2 and 3 of Comelec Resolution 10727. Let's listen to Attorney Grace. Attorney?
Thank you, Attorney Shillet. My discussion will dwell on Article 2, the Constitution, the composition, and the appointment of electoral boards, the DepEd supervisor official, their respective support staff, and also the medical personnel. Now, before that, I want us to have a simple visualization of the actual voting center so that we can help us picture the different designations and the different functions of these various personnel that we will be talking about. We're here at La Paz Integrated School, one of the voting centers here in La Paz, Abra. Let's use it as a sample for our visualization purposes. So, let's look at the main feature, of course, is our polling place, aka our clustered precincts. And let's say we have here the desk of the DepEd supervisor official. So normally in the past elections, parang ganito lang siya, no? So we have the polling places and the DESO desk. So what's new? What's new for this upcoming 2022 elections? Now we have here the Voters Assistance Desk, the VAD, and as you can see, the IPP, the Isolation Polling Place. And also, you can see here, we have a strict delineation of the entrance and the exit for to the voting center. So yung VAD, Voters Assistance Desk, in the past meron din tayong ganito, no? But it was more of an option than a requirement. So, for example, in our case in La Trinidad, Benguet, in 2016, meron kaming parang ganito din. We were able to partner with the local university. So we tapped their nursing students who manned these desks. We called it water drinking stations. So it was nice because these are nursing students. They were in their proper uniforms, and at the same time, they brought with them their, stethoscopes, their first aid kits. So parang those in the past, parang ginagawa na din natin to. Pero kung kaya lang natin, and if we found it necessary. Pero ngayon, parang naging requirement na siya in the 2022. And at the same time, we have the isolation polling place here. There will be more detailed discussions on this by our fellow speakers later on. Who are the various personnel manning the voting center? Now, as I've said, my discussion will be on the electoral boards, the DESO, their support staff, and the medical personnel. So, syempre, our polling places, they are manned by our electoral boards. The DESO desk will be manned by the DepEd supervisor official. The VAD, the Voters Assistance Desk, will be manned by Citizens Arms and other civil society groups that we will be partnering with and deputized by the Commission. And the IPP, the isolation polling place, will be manned by the medical personnel and the support staff as well. So let's now go to the main players of our elections, the electoral boards. So we all know them, no? The chair, the chairman, the poll clerk, and the third member. Isa dapat sa kanila ay IT capable as certified by the Department of Science and Technology. And we also have a gender sensitivity provision, or the GAD provision in this in our resolution, that women may not be assigned to areas with security concerns or areas prone to gender-based violence. Okay? And then let us be reminded that the constitution of our electoral boards will officially be on from January 17 to 31, 2022. Now, let's look at the qualifications of our electoral boards. So, sobrang familiar na sa atin to. Dapat registered voters sila within the municipality or city. They should be of good moral character, of known integrity and competence. They should have never been convicted of election offense or any other crime which is punishable with more than 6 months of imprisonment. They should be able to speak and write Filipino or English or the local dialect. And then, yung disqualification nila naman, they should not be related within the 4th civil degree of consanguinity or affinity to any member of the EBs, of the electoral boards, among themselves, no? Or to any candidate to be voted in the polling place of assignment, or to said candidate's spouse. So, babalikan ko yan mamaya. For the other provisions under the qualifications, we can see here, preference shall be given to those who are fully vaccinated, without comorbidities, and below 60 years old. As well as, they are required to apply for a digital certificate or yung digital signature na pinag-uusapan natin with the DICT. No? So, ito yung mga bagong provisions natin brought about by the new situation by the new normal in the upcoming election. Okay. Now, let me go back and dwell a little on the disqualification because this has always been a source of confusion among electoral boards and even among us, no, na medyo nalilito tayo dito. So we all know that EBs, electoral boards, are disqualified when they have a relative among themselves up to the 4th civil degree of consanguinity or affinity among themselves or to the two candidates who are to be voted in their area, no? Now, parang klaro yon. Kaya lang, the confusion comes in when we speak of the spouses of these candidates. Reviewin natin yung pagbilang ng degree of relationships, no? So, the degree of consanguinity and affinity. So, let's start with the blood relatives, the side on the consanguinity. So, follow me through here. Let's say this is the electoral board, the member of the electoral board. So, we go up, his parents, his or her parents, and then his grandparents, and then going down to the siblings of one of his parents, and then the first cousin. So, I'm taking the case of the first cousin kasi ito yung pinaka-common na scenario, no? Sa mga ano. So, how are we related to the first cousin? How is EB related to his first cousin again? So, we were taught, bilangin lang natin yung arrows. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. So, yun. That's the first cousin in layman's term, the fourth cousin, the first cousin in layman's term is the relative of EB on the 4th civil degree of consanguinity. So, alam natin na kung yung first cousin natin mismo ang candidate, that EB, in that case, will be disqualified. Now, what if ang candidate is the spouse of the first cousin? So, is the EB still disqualified? Now, how is EB related to the spouse of his or her first cousin again? It's the same. So, fourth civil degree of affinity. Affinity na ngayon kasi asawa nung blood relative mo eh. So, affinity. So, still disqualified siya. Okay? Now, let's move on to the affinity side. Sa affinity side naman tayo. So, again, follow me through here. If you notice, yung arrow natin is diretso from EB to his or her parents-in-law. Kasi we are adapting the as ruled by jurisprudence, no? The maxim that husband and wife are one, hence there is no degree of relationship between them. Kasi there are differing opinions on this. Sometimes they say my spouse is my first degree relative, whereas yung iba naman, which is the more prevailing ruling in our jurisprudence, is walang degree sa amin kasi we are treated as one. So yun yung inadapt natin dito. So our arrow goes straight from EB to his or her parents-in-law, and then the grandparents-in-law, and then the uncle or auntie-in-law, and the first cousin-in-law. So, kung yung first cousin-in-law, because remember, these are already relatives by affinity of EB. Right? So, kung yung first cousin-in-law is the candidate, of course, EB is disqualified. Because that is, the candidate is the relative of EB to the fourth civil degree of affinity. Now, ang tanong is paano kung yung asawa nung first cousin-in-law ni EB ang ating candidate? Will he still be disqualified? So the question first is, what is the relationship between EB and the spouse of his first cousin-in-law? Are they in any way related? So, technically, ang sagot dyan is hindi. Because the first cousin-in-law is already the relative of EB by affinity. So, wala naman tayong relasyon na by affinity again, di ba? So, technically, they are not related. They are not relatives. Because as has always been ruled in our jurisprudence, there is no affinity between the blood relatives of one spouse to the blood relatives of the other spouse. So, halimbawa yung abirat na tawag namin sa Ilocano, or I think bilas or balae. But those are technically not relatives under the law, no? Pero in our civil service rules, for example, under the Code of Ethical Conduct for public officials, they are also treated as relatives. Kaya na-specify dyan sa mga batas na yan. Kaya lang dito, balik tayo sa ating situation for the disqualification of EB. Ang tanong ngayon is, are they in any way related? Sabi natin hindi. They are not relatives by affinity. They are not, because the relative by affinity is the first cousin-in-law. That is already affinity. But the final question, again, is EB disqualified or not? Well, the answer is yes. Why? They're not relatives. They're not relatives by affinity. But if we go back to the disqualification provision, it says, not related within the fourth civil degree of consanguinity or affinity to any candidate to be voted for in the polling place of assignment, hindi siya pasok doon, or to said candidate's spouse. So, dun siya covered. Kaya very specific yung sabi natin din, yung sabi sa provision na, or to said candidate's spouse. Now, that's for candidates. That's when we are talking about candidates. What about if we're talking about the EB themselves, among EB themselves? Let's say the spouse of EB's first cousin-in-law is not a candidate, but a candidate to be a member of the Electoral Board. Is he disqualified or not? Well, the provision says candidates. So the disqualification does not anymore, I submit that the disqualification does not anymore cover for the members of the electoral boards. Okay, so much for that. I hope that's clear among all of us. Now let's proceed to the powers of the electoral boards. So that's under section 19 of the resolution. So yung electoral boards, silang magkakandak ng final test ng FTS, the final testing and sealing of the VCM. They verify the identity of the voter in the EDCBL during the conduct of voting. They conduct the voting in the polling place. They administer the electronic counting of votes. They digitally sign and print the election returns. They do the transmittal thereof. They act as deputies of the Commission in the supervision and control of the conduct of election in the polling place. They maintain order within the polling place. They can prohibit the use of cellular phones as part of keeping order, cameras or any recording devices. They implement minimum public protocols, and they furnish copies of certificates of votes to those who are authorized to obtain some. Now, and other powers as may be provided by law or the commission later on. So all the details of these functions by the electoral boards will be discussed deeper by our fellow speakers later on. But basically, our EBs are our true election workers on election day. Kumbaga, the real deputies of the commission. Okay? Now, when it comes to the constitution of our EBs, we have an order of preference na sinusunod, provided also by the resolution. So, syempre, ang number one natin dyan is, number one is the public school teachers. And then, kung kulang yung willing and qualified, we have the private school teachers who are holding regular positions. So these also includes those in the secondary and the tertiary level teachers, yung mga college instructors natin. And then, kung kulang pa din, we can also tap from national government employees. This includes yung mga non-teaching personnel sa DepEd and other national government agencies. And then, kung kulang pa din, we can also tap members of accredited citizens' arms, the civil society groups or the non-government organizations in our area na pwede nating makapartner or na-deputize ng Comelec. And if kulang pa din, any registered voter of known integrity and competence and not related or connected to any candidate or political party. So kung sabi natin related or connected, this covers yung mga supporters, yung mga contributors, donors, and analogous situations, Like, halimbawa, laging nagvo-volunteer or laging leader sa mga motorcade ng isang political party or politician, syempre hindi disqualified pa din yun. And then, in some cases or in extreme cases, the members of the PNP, the members of the Philippine National Police, if peace and order situation in the area requires it. Kasi nga, in some areas, medyo delikado talaga mag-serve yung mga civilian. So, in extreme areas, nangyayari ito, na yung mga police ang nagsiserve as members of the electoral boards. Okay? If they, again, that is if peace and order situation in the area requires it, as determined by the commission, or if there are no other qualified, willing, and available persons from the other preferred groups that we have discussed. Okay, now ang importante dito for us, election officers, is there will be a period of application, no? So, i-provide yan ng Comelec later on sa mga any registered voter. So, sa number 5, yung sa number 5 na pwede yung mga any registered voter. So, the commission will provide a period of application kasi nga anybody can apply, di ba? And we are required to post for at least 3 days prior to the start of such period na pwede nang na-open na yung application. Now, the question here might be like, what if I have a situation wherein I have to choose between two candidates to be members of the Electoral Board, and one is a public school teacher who is above 60 years old and unvaccinated, and another is from the private school. So what if I am to choose between these two? Isang unvaccinated na public school teacher, number 1 yan sa preference natin, and a private school teacher who is fully vaccinated, pero number 2 lang siya sa preference natin, sa order of preference. So, sino ngayon ang ating pipiliin? Now, if we go back, if we look at the provision in the resolution, yung sa under qualifications, no, kahit dinagdag ng framers ng ating resolution, yung preference shall be given to those fully vaccinated without comorbidities and below 60 years old. Kasama niya yung sa requirement ng digital signature. So, nasa section 7 yon, kasama yung mga qualification. So, although it's not exactly included as a qualification, itong provisions na to, naisama siya sa provision na yon. So, parang kung iisipin mo, parang before we look at the preferences, we should already screen them out sa under qualification. So, parang gano'n, no? So, parang if I were to deal with such a situation, mukhang yung sa private school teacher na fully vaccinated naman ang i-prefer ko. Okay? So, there are other key points that we have to remember when it comes to our electoral boards. Remember, we are required to prepare a list of substitutes. The resolution says a list of substitutes shall be prepared by the EO, observing the same order of preferences. And the pool of substitutes shall be 20% of the total number of the electoral boards to be appointed. So, yung mga substitutes natin, they shall be on call on election day. And 20%, so halimbawa, in our case, in La Trinidad, we have 80 clustered precincts. So, that's 80 times 3. So, 240 EBs, no? So, 240 times 20%, that's 48. So, on our list of substitutes, dapat may 48 na names dyan. Okay? We also had the same provision for substitutes in the past elections, pero like in 2019, 10% lang ito, diba? But now, because of the contingencies that we're in the new normal, 20% now. Okay, we also need to orient our electoral boards in terms of their voting rights. So, they have 3 options, no? So, unang-una, they can vote in their polling place of assignment kahit wala sila sa EDCBL. Let's say they are not registered in that precinct where they are assigned as ED. Pero they can vote there provided, number 1, syempre may active voter registration sila sa munisipyo. And then secondly, they manually add their names in the EDCBL. And third, that they should note the same in the minutes, the voting minutes that they're gonna prepare after the voting. So parang they should put there that they exercise their voting right in such manner. So second option that they have is they can go to their original registration precinct. So let's say malapit lang yun, so they can go there and vote and then come back. Provided they do that, number one, during the time when voting is light in their polling assignment. Second, yung pagpunta, pagbalik, pagboto, and pagbalik should only take up to 30 minutes. So hindi sila dapat mawala ng more than 30 minutes. And third, again, they should note the same in the minutes. And of course, third option that they have is of course the local absentee voting kasi like other government officials or public school teachers, they are also entitled to such, no? So paki-remind lang natin, that is covered by another resolution, pero paki-remind lang natin, yung application is up to March 7 with their respective heads of agencies. And voting happens on April 27 to 29, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And na yun, manual yun, no? Manual yung pagboto doon. At saka, national positions only. So, sabihin natin yun sa kanila. And third thing, before we deploy our electoral boards in the polling places, let's make sure na nag-accomplish na sila ng appointment, na binigyan natin sila ng appointment with their oath, yung forms CF number A5 and A5-A, before they are deployed to their polling places. 3 copies yun, no? And also, they bring with them yung temporary appointment just in case na, yun nga, yung sabi natin kanina, for the substitute, in case may mangyari na hindi sila makompleto, they can appoint a substitute. Okay? And for us EOs also, let us remember, we are required to post a list of the electoral boards for 5 days, a day after their constitution. So, yung last day natin ng constitution, sabi natin is January 31, no? Kasi ang constitution is January 17 to 31. So, by February 1, dapat nakapag-post na po tayo dyan. And also, finally, yung reports on the list of all the constituted personnel, required tayong mag-submit dyan sa OPES within 3 days after constitution. So, let's say January 31, by February 3, dapat nakasubmit na tayo sa OPES. So, let's now proceed to talk about the support staff of the electoral boards, the EB support staff. So, the EB support staff, basically, they assist in all the work of the electoral boards, except that they cannot be a part of the decision making. So, in other words, the EB support staff takes instructions from the members of the electoral board sa kanyang mga gagawin, no? Now, qualifications and disqualifications of an EB support staff is pareho lang with the members of the electoral board, except for the requirement of being a registered voter. So, yun yung parang nagiging option ng mga teachers natin na very qualified naman, pero unfortunately, they're registered in a different place. So, nagiging support staff na lang sila. Okay? So, sabi dyan, there should be at least 1 support staff for every electoral board. So, parang sa ating clustered precinct, sa ating polling place, minimum of 4 ang nagmaman dyan, no? Yung 3 members of the electoral board, at saka yung one support staff. Now, pwede bang dagdagan ang support staff? Yes. Sabi sa resolution, kung 4 established precincts ang isang cluster sa polling place, pwedeng magdagdag tayo ng isa pang EB support staff dyan. Kung 5 naman, 5 or more, pwede tayong magdagdag ng 2. So, let's look at some examples. Ito, sample POP namin sa La Trinidad, no? So, let's say in cluster 1, ilan ang established precinct dyan? So, 1, 2, 3. So, 3. So, ilan ang support staff dyan? Isa lang. So, bale, 4 sila. Yung EBs na 3 and then isang support staff. Now, another one. Ano naman yung cluster 12, another example. Itong cluster 12 na to. So, ilan ang established precinct dyan? 1, 2, 3, 4. So, 4. So, sabi sa reso, pwede tayong magdagdag ng isa pang support staff. So, bali ilan na sila, including the EBs, the members of EB. Meron na tayong 5 na nagmaman dyan. The 3 members of the EB and 2 support staff. 1 original and 1 additional. Last example, yung cluster 3 namin. Yan, ilan ang established precincts dyan? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, 5. Sabi sa reso, pwedeng magdagdag ng 2 additional support staff kung merong 5 or more established precinct in one cluster. Now, you might ask me, kasi ito, no, tingnan natin. Ang basehan kasi sa reso, sa additional support staff, is yung number of established precincts. Pero kung titignan mo yung cluster 12 na example natin, 4 na established precinct yan, so isa lang ang additional na support staff. So, bali 2. 794 ang total registered voters dyan. No? 794. Pero, dito sa cluster 3, yung last na example natin, where there are 5 established precincts, therefore, we are qualified to get 2 additional support staff, kung titignan mo, 744 number of registered voters lang. So, parang mas marami pa yung number of registered voters dun sa 2 ang support staff kaysa dun sa 3 yung support staff. Diba? So, parang ganon. Parang ano yon, pero anyway, the resolution says may appoint additional support staff. It's not really required na basta 5 clustered precinct yan, ay kailangan 2. It's not mandatory, no? The wording of the resolution says may appoint additional support staff. Okay? So, bahala na tayong magbalanse as long as nafa-follow natin yung allocation according to the reso. Okay. So, that's about it for EB support staff. We can now proceed to the DepEd supervisor official. So, yung DESO natin, siya yung overall na overseer of the voting center, no? In fact, all the other personnel in the voting center, except of course for the electoral boards and their support staff, all the other personnel are somewhat under the supervision of the DESO. Okay? So let's review her functions. His or her functions. So, unang-una, serve as COVID marshal. Bago na yan sa new normal. The DESO also plans, organizes, and layouts the voting center. The DESO manages the crowd. Meron naman siyang support staff to do that. He should maintain a list of all personnel in the voting center for efficient coordination. He is also the supervisor of the APP and EAPP support staff. Yung APP, yung accessible polling place, and yung emergency accessory polling place, I think there will be more discussions on this later because these are governed by different resolutions. Pero yung mga support staff dyan is under the supervision of the DESO. And also, of course, the DESO serves as the contact person of the AO. So, siya yung parang deputy natin sa voting center. Contact person natin. Of course, the DESO supervises the safety protocol officer, the technical support staff, and the other support staff, the APP and AAPP, and all others as may be prescribed by law of the commission. So, parang, kung titingnan mo yung functions ng DESO, parang bumigat siya konti, no, compared sa yung 2019 or 2016, parang ganon. So parang for me, I would prefer sana na yung principal ng school, ng voting center, kung pwede, kung gusto niyang maging deso, I try to convince them na parang sila na, so that we are assured that they have full control of the whole voting center. So that come election day, at least assured tayo na hindi tayo pinagkakaitan ng mga facilities doon. And in case of contingencies, meron mga equipment, facilities na pwede nating ma-avail or pwede nating magamit sa voting center. At least kung principal yung DESO mismo, sure tayo na na-access natin yung mga yun during election day. Okay? So yung mga support staff ng DESO, meron tayong basically dalawa, yung safety protocol officer. So as the name denotes, yung safety protocol officer, siguro ang main function niya is to manage the crowd, no? Crowd management yan. And then the technical support staff. So yung technical support staff, medyo mabigat ang kanyang assignment. He must be IT capable with training on VCM kasi yung main talaga niya is technical eh. So parang main function talaga niya is to assist in troubleshooting the VCMs. Aside from that, the technical support staff is also in charge of the overall reporting sa status ng voting activities sa voting center, both on the day of final testing and sealing and on election day. So, i-report niya yan, naka-enumerate yan dyan sa sa RESO, like the time when VCMs were successfully installed, the time that voting started, the time that voting closed, yung transmission status, among others. So medyo mabigat din yung ng technical support staff. Okay, now other support staff is, sabi nga natin kanina, yung sa emergency accessible polling place, kung meron sa voting center, kasi hindi naman tayo lahat merong ganito. EAPP and the APPs. Okay? So I'm sure there will be more guidelines, detailed guidelines on this later on. Okay. So again, ano yung mga qualifications ng ating DESO and their support staff? So same din with electoral boards, except again for the requirement of being a registered voter. Okay? Now, ilan ang DESO natin at technical at support staff natin sa voting center, sa isang voting center? So, sabi, at least one. So, per voting center, merong at least isang DESO at isang safety protocol officer and technical support staff ng ating DESO. So, basically, tatlo yan sa isang voting center. Now, pwede bang may additional? Pwede din, sabi sa resolution, for DESO, if the clustered precincts, yung classrooms na ginagamit natin, yung polling places natin sa voting center, ay more than 10, pwede tayong magdagdag ng isa pa. Pag more than 20, another DESO, parang ganon. So, the same principle, no? Now, sa ating mga sa ating mga technical support staff and safety protocol officer, nakabase pa din sa number of clustered precincts, pero pag 6 to 10, pwede tayong magdagdag ng isa pa, and 11 to 15, isa pa. The same proportion, pag marami talaga. Okay? So, okay na tayo sa, finally, dito na tayo sa medical personnel. So, yung resolution, sabi dyan, in every voting center, the election officer shall appoint one medical personnel from the deputized agencies to be assigned in the isolation polling places, the IPP. So, we were thinking, I was discussing with Attorney Martin about this. Pwede kaya yung mga barangay health workers natin? Kasi, sila yung most available, and almost all our barangays, they have barangay health workers, and they are under DOH, so deputized agency naman natin yan. So, pwede siguro yung mga yan. Or, Kung walang available, like in our case, I'm thinking pwede kayang makimowa with the College of Nursing dito sa amin. For example, we have the Benguet State University College of Nursing, and they have the graduating nursing students, no, who will be more than willing to do this just in case wala kaming ibang makuha sa ating mga deputized agencies. Okay, so yun yung sa medical personnel. The IPP, as I've said, will be discussed in more detail later on by our fellow speakers. And from here, we shall proceed to the benefits, to the compensation of these various personnel, election personnel that we have been talking about. Attorney Belmes will tackle that part. Attorney Belmes?
Thank you, Attorney Grace. Hello, everyone. So the scope of my presentation is on benefits and watchers. Benefits is provided in the last part of Article 2 of Comelec Resolution 10727 in sections 33 to 44 thereof. And watchers is provided in Article 3 of Comelec Resolution 10727. So let's start with the benefits for rendering election-related service. Persons rendering election-related service shall be entitled to the following benefits and allowances. We have the first one, honoraria, followed by the travel allowance, and another one is the communication allowance, and we have a new one which is only available during this pandemic election. In previous elections, we don't have this. We call it the anti-COVID-19 allowance, followed by the service credit, and finally, other benefits. So the first on the list is the honoraria. It is provided in Section 33, Paragraph A of Comelec Resolution 10727. The highest amount of honorarium is granted to the chairperson of the Electoral Board in the total amount of 7,000 pesos. And this one is followed by the members of the Electoral Board in the total amount of 6,000 pesos, whether the poll clerk or the third member. And this one is followed by the Department of Education supervisor official, or what we call as DESO, and the DESO shall get a total amount of 5,000 pesos. And of course, we also have the support staff of the Electoral Board, the DESO, the support staff of the EAPP, or the Emergency Accessible Polling Place, in the total amount of 3,000 pesos. And finally, the medical officer, who shall get the amount of 3,000 pesos honorarium. The next is the travel allowance, and this is provided in Section 33, Paragraph B of Comelec Resolution 10727. The chairperson and members of the Electoral Board, the DESO, as well as the support staff of the Electoral Board, the DESO, they shall get 1,000 pesos for the testing and sealing, and another 1,000 pesos for the election day. And of course, for the travel allowance, they are entitled to receive a total of 2,000 pesos. On the other hand, the support staff of the EAPP and the IPP, or what we call the Emergency Accessible Polling Place and the Isolation Polling Place support staff, they will be getting only 1,000 pesos for election day services. The same with the medical officer, who shall get 1,000 for election day. So this means that the support staff of the EAPP and the IPP, as well as the medical personnel, shall not be required to attend the testing and sealing of the vote counting machine. They shall only be required to be present on election day. The third is the communication allowance provided in Section 33, Paragraph C of Comelec Resolution 10727. Only the DESO and the DESO technical support staff shall be entitled to receive this allowance in the total amount of 1,500 pesos. This allowance is intended to support these personnel in the performance of their duty to report any technical incidents in the voting center to the election officer concerned as well as to the NTSC. The members of the Electoral Board, the DESO, and their respective support staff, as well as the medical personnel and the support staff of the EAPP or the Emergency Accessible Polling Place shall be entitled to this anti-COVID-19 allowance in the amount of 500 pesos each. The fifth is service credit provided in paragraph E of section 33 in Comelec Resolution 10727. A minimum of 5 days service credit shall accrue to all government officials and employees for serving as members of the Electoral Board, DESO, medical personnel, or support staff. Honoraria and allowances mentioned in Section 33 of Comelec Resolution 10727 shall be paid within 15 days from the day of the elections, May 9, 2022, which shall be not later than May 24, 2022. And the making of any delay or causing delay in the payment beyond 15 days from May 9, 2022 shall constitute an election offense. There are other benefits provided in our resolution. Death benefits shall be given to deaths due to election-related risk, and it's in the total amount of 500,000 pesos. For election-related injury or illness, an amount not exceeding 200,000 pesos shall be provided as a medical assistance. An equitable legal indemnification package shall be given to persons who rendered election service and have been a party to a criminal, administrative, or civil action, suit, or proceeding by reason of or on occasion of the performance of their official duties shall be established in the form of the following: the legal assistance. The next one is the lawyer's fee. The third one is the indemnification for legal costs and expenses reasonably incurred. And finally, the other forms of legal protection. The amount of 50,000 pesos as legal indemnification package shall be made available to each claimant. And this legal indemnification package can be availed of by either a complainant or a defendant. But in the case of a complainant, the case initiated should be with the authority of the Commission on Elections. As a defendant, the party should be involved in an administrative, civil, or criminal action as a result of the performance of his official duties in the elections. The benefit refers to the authority to engage the services of a government or private lawyer immediately upon receipt of notice of the filing of an action or suit. This means that legal assistance is available at the very start of the proceeding, that is, from the preliminary investigation. The government lawyers pertain to the lawyers of the Public Attorney's Office as part of the agency's deputation during elections. The second component of the legal indemnification package is the lawyer's fees. It is provided in Section 41 of Comelec Resolution 10727 that in the engagement of a government lawyer, no lawyer's fees shall be awarded. And the same rule applies when the services of a private lawyer is rendered pro bono or free of charge. On the other hand, a person who rendered election service shall be awarded with lawyer's fees when he or she engages the services of a private lawyer. There are limitations to this. First, it should be upon the recommendation of the Committee on Claims and Assessment, which is composed of the following: the Office of the Deputy Executive Director for Operations, second, the Law Department, third, the Personnel Department, and finally, the Finance Services Department of the Commission on Elections. And the second condition, it should not exceed the total indemnification package of 50,000 pesos. The third component of the legal indemnification package includes legal costs and other reasonable expenses, which refer to expenses directly incurred by reason of the case, such as but not limited to the following. First, filing fees, if applicable. And this means that here, it should be referring to a person who rendered election service as a complainant. But take note of the requirement. If a person who rendered service files a case, there should be an authority coming from the Commission on Elections. Second, mailing. The third one, notarial fees. And finally, but not limited to this list, the gathering of and photocopy of evidence. The final component of the legal indemnification package include other forms of legal protection. This provision is general, but it could refer to, for example, security or the provision of security personnel during the investigation or the prosecution of the case in case there is a threat or intimidation employed upon the person who rendered election service. But we should take note of the process. First, there should be a request to be filed with the Committee on Claims and Assessment, and this request will be evaluated by the Committee on Claims and Assessment. As to the reasonable legal expenses mentioned early on, the reimbursement is only allowed if the person who rendered election service is not found guilty of an election offense or exonerated from civil, criminal, or administrative case filed. And therefore, if the person who rendered election service is convicted or found guilty, and therefore shall not be entitled to reimburse the reasonable legal expenses he incurred during the prosecution of the case. The next topic we're going to discuss is watchers. Sometimes watchers create disturbance inside the polling place. And so here, we're going to discuss their rights and duties as well as their qualifications. This topic on watchers is divided into 6. The first one, the number of watchers allowed. Second, the preferences. Third, the qualifications of watchers. Next, the requirements. And then, we have the rights and the duties of these watchers. Each candidate, duly registered political party or coalition of political parties, associations or organizations participating in the party list system, and duly accredited citizens' arms shall be entitled to 2 watchers to serve alternately. On the other hand, senators and members of the Sangguniang Panlalawigan, Panlungsod, or Bayan belonging to the same political party or coalition, as well as other civic, religious, professional, business, service, youth, and any other similar organizations with prior authority from the Commission on Elections shall be entitled to 1 watcher. If the space in the polling place reserved for watchers is insufficient, the watchers of the dominant majority and watchers of minority parties, as determined by the Commission on Elections, shall be given preference. Watchers of the citizens' arms shall be given preferential position closest to the EB. Like the members of the electoral boards, the DESO, the support staff, and medical personnel, watchers also have their own qualifications imposed by law. In Section 46 of Comelec Resolution 10727, the first requirement is that a watcher should be a registered voter of the city or municipality where the person is assigned. The watcher should be of good moral character. A watcher shall not have been convicted by final judgment of any election offense or of any other crime. And take note that this disqualification of a watcher does not provide for any expiration. The fourth one is that the watcher should know how to read and write Filipino, English, or the prevailing local dialect. And the last qualification is that watchers shall not be related within the fourth civil degree by consanguinity or affinity to the members of the Electoral Board, the EB chairperson, the poll clerk, or the third member in the polling place where he or she is assigned. We may ask, may candidates' relatives or the spouse of a candidate serve as a watcher? Of course, they are allowed to serve as watchers because the disqualification only pertains to the relationship of the watcher to the members of the Electoral Board and not the relationship of these watchers to the candidates. As a requirement, at least 15 days before election day, the election officer of the city or municipality must be provided with the names and signatures of the authorized representatives of candidates or political parties to appoint the watchers. And the watchers must be issued with an appointment bearing the signature of that authorized representative. On election day, when watchers present themselves to the members of the Electoral Board, particularly the chairperson, watchers must present to the chairperson of the Electoral Board a copy of their appointment and a proof of registration. In practice, an identification card is provided to the watchers by the candidate or political party, and that valid ID is signed by the election officer after certifying the fact of registration of that watcher in the city or municipality. After the appointment and the proof of registration are presented to the chairperson of the Electoral Board, it should be recorded in the minutes of the proceedings, and a notation should be provided under their signatures that they are not disqualified to serve as watchers. Section 47 of Comelec Resolution 10727 provides that watchers should stay in the space reserved for them inside the polling place. And second, they have the right to witness and inform themselves of the proceedings of the Electoral Board. They can take note of what they see or hear, and they can take picture, image, photo, or video of the proceedings and incidents. It is an election offense to take pictures, images, photos, or videos while the voter is shading the ballot and feeding the same in the vote counting machine. Watchers may also file a protest against any irregularity or violation of law by the Electoral Board or any person present in the polling place. Next, they can obtain from the Electoral Board a certificate as to the filing of such protest and or the resolution thereof. And finally, they have the right to position themselves near the Electoral Board chairperson, observing the 1 meter physical distancing requirement while the chairperson is publicly announcing the precinct results. The preferential position closest to the Electoral Board is given to the watchers of the citizens' army. We have the duties of the watcher provided in Section 47 of Comelec Resolution 10727. They have that duty not to speak to any Electoral Board member or to any voter or among themselves in any manner that would disrupt the proceedings. And finally, they can affix their signature in the election returns if they are available at the closing of the polling place. So that's the last part of my presentation on benefits and watchers. Thank you for listening. Again, this is Attorney Mary Shelby Belmes, the Provincial Election Supervisor of the Province of Abra. Yes, and that's the end of our video. Arigatou gozaimasu.